Are you counting them? It's going to be all right. Dr. Lavinia is going to help us.
Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're taking a look at the 20 worst horror games ever made. There are absolutely fates worse than death.
Gregory, are you certain you have seen a dancing rabbit lady? I believe you if you say you have, but it is highly unlikely.
Before we begin, we publish new videos all week long, so be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Night Trap.
We got big problems.
What?
The Augs are here.
Some may fault Night Trap for being part of the reason why the ESRB exists, but that's not necessarily the game's biggest problem. While the game is a big part of video game history as a whole, Night Trap really isn't much else outside of its part in the birth of video game age ratings. On its own, it's a really schlocky kind of game. Do not expect a decent plot, do not expect believable characters or engaging gameplay. It can only be enjoyed as another corny slasher flick with some audience participation and poor controls integrated into it. Had it not caused such a stir among politicians and parents alongside Mortal Kombat, Night Trap would have most likely been left behind in the 90s, along with that admittedly catchy theme song. Night Trap, watch out behind you, Night Trap.
It's not over yet, my sweet little plum.
Dino Crisis 3.
What are these things?
A common problem AAA publishers have had with horror games is straying too far away from the horror aspect and leaning too heavily into the action. It's almost like you shouldn't rely on sequels too heavily and too often, or else the games just don't get scary anymore. While Capcom hadn't crossed that rickety bridge with Resident Evil just yet in 2003, it quickly did with Dino Crisis. Ask any fan and they'll tell you how much Dino Crisis 3 face-planted for one of three very big reasons. Either they grew frustrated from the awful camera controls, they hated how action-heavy the game was compared to its more puzzle-centric nature in previous games, or they'll go on a tirade on why Patrick just sucks as a protagonist. Whichever rant they go on, you'll know the negativity is warranted. Ju-on the Grudge. In all honesty, Ju-on the Grudge may be the least offensive game on this list, as its crimes could only be described as simple misdemeanors, if anything. It's not that there isn't anything actually bad about the game, but more so the fact that it makes the same simple mistakes as so many other regular bad games. Even by the Wii standards, the visuals are abysmal, and like so many other shovelware Wii titles we saw back then, the controls barely work half the time. We could forgive the lack of interesting environments if Ju-on utilized more of the Wii's motion controls for things other than moving your flashlight around. Like, I don't know, maybe more interactions with the environment? You know, immersion? Michigan, report from hell.
That's why we've got to keep going, for her. Let's go out there and capture the truth.
Before they became known for Killer 7, Lollipop Chainsaw, and Shadows of the Damned, Grasshopper Manufacture developed this dumpster fire of a game. Okay, maybe dumpster fire isn't super accurate in describing how bad this game is. It is technically sound after all. The big problem though is that Michigan Report from Hell wants to be a campy horror game like the original Resident Evil, but deviates from its focus so frequently. There is so much sexual innuendo, much of it aimed at Pamela, one of the main characters, that it makes the game kind of uncomfortable to play. We're not prudish, but if the innuendos were a lot less frequent, it wouldn't feel like Pamela was being objectified all of the time. Consider this the plumbers don't wear ties of the horror scene. Remothered, Broken Porcelain.
You know they used to call him Wyman once upon a time.
You're haunting me!
The funny thing about Remothered is that the original game from 2018, Tormented Fathers, was actually a good step in the right direction with its narrative and presentation. So where did Broken Porcelain go wrong? Well, cutscenes run about as smoothly as PS1 FMV sequences, and not sure if a 2020 game should be functioning that way, but then again, most modern games also don't have awful checkpoint systems and make the player endure challenges built entirely on just guessing. Broken Porcelain just gave no sense of direction here, and when your combat offers nothing interesting either, there just isn't much of a reason for anybody to play your game.
I have to go back. I have to return to my parents.
But what about the contest?
I'll be there. I promise.
BlackSoul. Look, we can understand what BlackSoul was trying to do. At the time of its release, survival horror games were waffling about with fluff, bloat, and action game mechanics rather than stay true to the genre and, be scary. BlackSoul wanted to rewind the clock back to a time where things were more simple and more focused on scaring the bejesus out of us. But in its own ambition, it lost the plot of what made older survival horror titles great to begin with. It isn't enough to look the part with updated graphics and walk the walk with tank controls. You need good music to match your tone. You need your combat to have some kind of oomph behind it. And most importantly, you need interesting environments that aren't your run-of-the-mill graveyards and catacombs. BlackSoul just didn't get any of that and wound up looking like generic Steam greenlight fodder that somehow got enough votes to make it onto the store. The Walking Dead Survival Instinct.
Jimmy Blake, last standing officer of the Sedalia SO.
Go for you.
Sure, we could have put Destinies on here, but that game is kind of missing a lot of horror in its action-heavy gameplay, wouldn't you say? No, Survival Instinct is still the worst horror-centric game in the IP's history. The cheap budget is on full display here, and it'll either make you laugh or cry depending on how much money you burned grabbing this game, or how much you care about Norman Reedus looking good like he does in real life. But what made things worse was just how stupid the AI was, as zombies would often run into each other or other objects. Sorry, but you can't sit there and tell us AMC couldn't fork over enough money to make a solid Walking Dead game. Not after all the money the show was printing back in 2013 and before that. The Letter. A title like that could invoke some curiosity in your average customer, even more if said customer was looking for a game on a shoestring budget. Alas, this is one of those you get what you paid for scenarios. $2 may not seem like a bad deal, but when the assets are about as detailed as Pixar's The Adventures of Andre and Wally B, The Letter looks like it was made within a single afternoon. What's worse is that there's absolutely nothing interesting about the story whatsoever, and the big plot twist feels like a lazy cop-out. Really? It was all just a dream? That's the big reveal? Come on, you can do better than that. Stray Souls.
Well, that's fixed. And nothing happened. Did I miss something?
Dollhouses can be scary, but in the case of Stray Souls, it's the least of your worries. On the surface, this game looks like a successor to Resident Evil 4, or at minimum, a game heavily inspired by it. But all that footage you see in the trailers, well, that's what the game would look and play like if it worked! Stray Souls suffers from so many audio and visual bugs that it is virtually impossible to play. Sure, you can try, but after how many times you fall through the map, or how many times you die because an audio cue didn't play correctly until you uninstall. What's even more sketchy are the allegations against developer Jukai Studio and publisher Versus Evil, who were accused by users to be banning and removing negative Steam reviews. That said, what redeeming qualities could possibly be left that would earn our $30?
Just stop! I can't let you do this.
Garten of Banban. Ever since Five Nights at Freddy's became a new horror icon in pop culture, so many copycats have come and gone to ride its coattails and get a slice of that horror for children pie. Of them all, Garten of Banban is the most egregious and suspicious. If the game looks cheap to you with its visuals and audio design, well, we're willing to bet it was cheap to produce. After all, how else do you manage to belt out 7 games within the span of 18 months? That's a year and a half. A year and a half and 7 entire games. Plus, when each game holds so many empty rooms and not a lot happening between story beats and enemy encounters, well, why do these games cost $5 to $10 a pop? Why? Slender, The Arrival. The whole fad behind Slender Man was in our rearview mirrors by the time Slender the Arrival launched. But hey, maybe this could rejuvenate interest, right? Not on your life, sport. What were you thinking? Slender the Arrival is more technically sound than most of the games on our list, but that's really not a high bar to surpass. Everything here was just the 8 Pages game we all played in 2012, just with a higher budget for better environments and a more focused narrative, maybe. In other words, you've played this game before. We all did. The only difference here is that the camera could miraculously break and refuse to move whenever it decided to do so. I know this because it happened to me several times, and I managed to repeat it without fail. So yeah, good luck trying to find even page 1. Saw 2, Flesh and Blood.
Hello, Griff. You were a promising college student.
The first Saw video game wasn't super decent. The sequel? Oh, the sequel was way worse. Whereas the first game had some semblance of a combat system and unique environments, Saw 2 said, nah brah, watch this. The puzzles incorporated were about as clever as a leapfrog tablet, while the environments felt just so ungodly generic, like they were assets from an unfinished Silent Hill game. And just when you thought the story might be decent with its 2 different endings, well, hope you have a guide nearby, because guess what? Saw 2 refuses to give you any hint whatsoever as to how you even get the other ending. And get this, your ending is entirely determined by your actions in the very first segment of the game. How is that fair, Jigsaw? Is that part of your sick game?
Speak out and we'll be done here. You're gonna hit me with a stick?
Aliens, Colonial Marines.
On your feet, Marines. For any new recruits, I'm Captain Cruz, and you are my crew on the USS Sephora.
When your game turns out to be a technical disaster all because of one little typo, dude, that egg is never gonna get washed from your face. Aliens Colonial Marines turned our once terrifying xenomorphs into a colossal comedy punching bag. Ever wanted to see a xenomorph walk around normally? You could do that. Want to see a xenomorph casually strolling into a wall or crate though? Got an attraction for you right here. Or perhaps, if the game figures out how to work properly, would you maybe like to see some of the most awkward combat encounters between an NPC and a xenomorph? Ladies and gentlemen, Colonial Marines is the shoddiest Cirque du Soleil you can find on this side of the USS Sulaco, and Gearbox will never live it down.
Come on.
Rise of Nightmares.
Thank God it's you. I didn't think anyone else survived.
Remember the Kinect? Remember how awful the controls were for so many of the games made for it? Well, Rise of Nightmares, despite its promising appearance, was among those games. Granted, there is something terrifying here in how it forces the user to nearly physically interact with its grotesque environments and fight off enemies. You might find some fun here, but here's the thing. As we said before, this is a Kinect game, and like most of the other games in that library, Rise of Nightmares has some horrid controls. It almost hurts to witness because you can see the ideas Sega's staff had here. Alas, a functioning Kinect game is like asking for money to fall from the sky. It's just never gonna happen.
Joshua, you still have time. Your wife is at the ritual site.
Hello, neighbor. We've all had that one neighbor that looks like they're always up to some shady activity. That was the day-to-day conspiracy Hello Neighbor wanted to lean into, and it's what got so many of us invested. Now, imagine a game that took that concept and went absolutely nowhere with it. The design of the neighbor's house felt like a hodgepodge of random assets crammed into a single building, removing almost every ounce of realism the game could have had. Believe it or not, you do need some kind of realism and logic, regardless if you're using cartoony visuals, you know? Combine that with the abysmal technical performance, and you'll discover the true mystery behind Hello Neighbor. How has this game spawned so many sequels and an animated TV series? How? Agony.
It's you. I knew it. I knew you'd be here, Amraphel.
The only good thing you could say about Agony was that it was one of the most imaginative depictions of hell. And that's pretty much it. That's really the only good thing you can say about this game. As for the negatives, there's a whole laundry list we could go through. It would take all day, but here's the summary. Broken stealth, no proper means for the player to defend themselves or avoid danger upon being spotted, scenes that come off like they were only there for shock value and shock value only, messy storytelling. What else more can we say? It's a game that had a ton of potential when we first saw it, but now, insert obvious joke about Agony being agonizing to play. Alone in the Dark, Illumination. If there is one thing we'll give 2024's Alone in the Dark credit for, it's that it is nowhere near as dreadful as 2015's Alone in the Dark Illumination. What a surprise! A franchise composed entirely of single-player games suddenly pivoting to co-op multiplayer? What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything went wrong. While the game borrows Alan Wake's idea of harming enemies with light, the level design and technical performance cause the entire game to implode on itself. The randomly generated environments are too bland to keep track of the layout, enemies are constantly spawning in with no respite in between, and there is just absolutely no replay value of any kind for such an insanely short game. Honestly, if you really want a co-op multiplayer experience, just go play Left 4 Dead. Or better yet, if you just want to play Alone in the Dark, go play that awful 2008 reboot if you want a schlocky good time. Silent Hill: The Short Message.
Don't worry about what people think. Be proud.
A new single-player Silent Hill game, and it's free? Something's up. And sure enough, our suspicions were correct, as The Short Message was one of the worst games we played in 2024. For starters, nothing about this game was mildly scary in any way, shape, or form. Oh, we're supposed to be scared of paper notes with mean things written on them? Brilliant. Second, the game desperately wants to talk about mental illness, but says absolutely nothing clever nor meaningful during its time on the mic. It all just boils down to, wow guys, isn't mental illness so awful? I mean, man, it sucks that people go through this. It's so horrible. Yes, Silent Hill, mental illness is bad. Is there anything else you would like to say about it? No? Oh, okay then.
Then who's this?
Find it.
Who?
Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach.
Showtime already? I am experiencing a malfunction. The recharge cycle is not complete.
This should have been the easiest slam dunk for Steel Wool Studios to make, yet they found every way to fumble it in the worst ways possible. A FNaF game done in the style of first-person survival horror would have made bank. Security Breach probably did make bank, but holy crap did it disappoint. Stealth is broken in how enemies will spot you from miles away, or somehow figure out where exactly you're hiding, even if you did manage to lose them in a chase. Button prompts to interact with objects are finicky, and will require you to sit still and hold a button down for several seconds at a time. And good luck making sense of the layouts of each area. Seriously, how do you mess this up?
Kids who have home birthdays have fewer friends and parents who don't love them. This has been another fun Fast Fact.
Amy.
I'm okay. I'm not gonna hurt you.
I need to find a little girl. Have you seen anyone?
Despite its age, Amy will forever be known as the worst horror game to ever exist. Some games may be forgiven by some players for having a messy story. Had that been Amy's only problem, maybe its ugly mug wouldn't be on this list. However, the worst crime Amy committed was just being broken mechanically in every single possible way. Picking up items, landing hits on enemies, getting this dumb little girl to heal you, everything you do in this game is practically determined by God, as you'll never know when the game decides it wants to function decently. Amy was in such an abysmal state that many reviewers at the time, including former IGN editor Colin Moriarty, refused to suffer through another minute of this game. It was that bad.
Hello, ladies. It looks like you could use some divine intervention.
Did you suffer through any of these titles yourself? Don't be ashamed, we've all played a bad game before. I played Security Breach, it was horrible. I suffered through it, and I don't want to go back. But let us know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to MojoPlays for more great videos every day.